I'm going to be reading a few pages from my book, Crossing the Threshold, subtitled Etheric Imagination in the Post-Kantian Process Philosophy of Schelling and Whitehead. This is from page 114. Whitehead accused modern philosophers, including Descartes, Hume, and Kant, of committing a set of related mistakes. First, they assume that the five senses are the only definite avenues of communication between human experience and the external world. And second, they assume that conscious introspection is our sole means of analyzing experience. The first mistake ignores the fact that, quote, the living organ of experience is the living body as a whole, end quote. That's Whitehead from Adventures of Ideas. The second mistake ignores the way that conscious introspection, though it, quote, lifts the clear-cut data of sensation into primacy, for that very reason cloaks the vague compulsions and derivations from which form the main stuff of experience, end quote. This living organ that Whitehead speaks of normally remains in unconscious causal contact with sub- and supersensory modes of energetic transaction, with reflective consciousness distracted by its conceptual expectations. Later chapters speculate on the role of etheric imagination in bringing a descendental mode of consciousness to these transactions. Rather than imposing causality upon sense perception via the machinations of a transcendental ego, Whitehead reinterprets bodily sense reception as already causally ordered. Causality is not an abstract category, but an aesthetic power, the vague feeling of inheritance making up the main stuff of experience. Similarly, space and time cannot be mere forms of intuition projected upon an otherwise incomprehensible sensory chaos. Instead, our intuitions of space and time are the most aboriginal and generic feelings inherited in our bodily aesthetic encounter with the contemporary universe. Whitehead terms the general character of space-time, quote, the uniformity of the texture of experience, end quote. Though, unlike for Kant, this experiential texture is not simply the construct of human minds or sense organs. From Whitehead's descendental perspective, quote, we know ourselves as a function of unification of a plurality of things which are other than ourselves. We know ourselves as a function of unification of a plurality of things which are other than ourselves, end quote. That's from Science and the Modern World. Space-time is the most generic pattern of possible experience realized thus far by the community of actual occasions constitutive not only of our bodily organism, but of the wider social order sheltering this cosmic epoch. We experience a more or less stable, causally continuous spatiotemporal manifold because an enveloping cosmic community of physical actualities, for example, the occasions associated with gravitational, electromagnetic, atomic, stellar, and galactic societies. This community of physical actualities is constructing, with mutual modifications accruing along the way, a suitable habitat within which a, quote, concentrated efficiency and intensity of experiential satisfaction, end quote, can be realized in higher grade occasions. For example, those associated with the complex physiology of conscious primates such as ourselves. Our conscious awareness and scientific cognition of nature, quote, is the emergence into some measure of individualized reality of the general substratum of spatiotemporalizing activity, poising before itself possibility, actuality, and purpose. Again, Whitehead from Science and the Modern World. there is no sharp boundary to be drawn between our consciousness, the human body, and the rest of nature. The truth, says Whitehead, quote, is that the brain is continuous with the body, and the body is continuous with the rest of the natural world, such that each moment of human experience is an act of self-origination, including the whole of nature, end quote. So space-time is not produced by the electrochemical patterns of activation within our skull, nor the transcendental forms of our mind. Rather, the entire organism environment field, the whole cosmic socius, is involved in generating our spatiotemporal experience. The topology of space-time is an emergent product of the collective character, the individual drops of experience making up our cosmic neighborhood. The mathematical structure of the space-time continuum known to physics is not an a priori imposition of the mind, nor a necessary law imposed upon nature from beyond, but an emergent pattern of mutual relations achieved by the most widespread society of occasions pervading this cosmic epoch. In other words, space and time as we experience them arise from reciprocal communication between electronic, protonic, and other widespread microcosmic actual occasions of experience, quote, forming a background in layers of social order for our more complex organic physiology as human bodies. The formal or mathematical structure of the spatiotemporal arena that these actualities bring forth is not eternally fixed, nor is it necessarily universal. This structure is the result of emergent evolution, of the prehensive bonds and organizational habits achieved by the societies of actual occasions communicating with our experience. Whitehead emphasizes the contingency of the evolved habits currently holding sway over the ecology of organisms shaping our cosmic epoch, no matter how general or universal they may appear to be at this time. The so-called laws of nature, including the specific causal structure of the space-time of our experience, are really habits that have developed within the societies of actual occasions of increasing width of prevalence, constituting our cosmic epoch. And here there's a footnote that adds that while Whitehead thinks that the continuous causal structure underlying the space-time of our experience is contingently emergent from the habits achieved during our cosmic epoch, he also recognizes a metaphysically necessary form of relatedness or extensive connection that I discuss in a different chapter. So the universe is thus, quote, a complex of prehensive unifications, end quote, with space-time, quote, exhibiting the general scheme of interlocked relations of these prehensions, end quote. Each actual occasion, quote, arises as an effect facing its past and ends as a cause facing its future, end quote. Each occasion's prehension of stubborn facts together with open possibilities breathes new life into the present moment again and again, providing the eternal pulse driving nature's becoming. Whitehead writes, quote, the oneness of the universe and the oneness of each element in the universe repeat themselves to the crack of doom in the creative advance from creature to creature, each creature including in itself the whole of history and exemplifying the self-identity of things and their mutual diversities. Not from Process and Reality. The most concrete reality of the cosmos is thus not a static structure or unbroken geometric continuum, but a creative and relational process. The world is an open-ended creality, not a finished reality. Living nature is described most concretely by Whitehead as, quote, the throbbing emotion of the past hurling itself into a new transcendent fact. From Adventures of Ideas. As a result of this descendental inversion of Kant's transcendental aesthetic, quote, what forms the limit of our intuitive faculty no longer falls within the sphere of our intuition itself, as Schelling says in his philosophy of Ideas for a Philosophy of Nature. Instead, these limits are constellated by the wider community of actual occasions whose social order shelters our experience. The conditions of actual experience are not a priori cognitive principles, but co-created relational patterns of cosmic composition. Such an account may seem to be a recursion to pre-Kantian realism, whereby space, time, and causality are ideas derived from generalizations of particular experiences, but on the contrary, Whitehead and Schelling do not accept the modern bifurcation of nature and related sensationalist doctrine shared by Descartes, Hume, Locke, and Kant alike. Space, time, and causality are not ideas derived from experience. They are conditions of experience. In this sense, neither Schelling nor Whitehead is a pre-critical thinker. But unlike Kant, whose forms of space and time and category of causality are constituted a priori by a transcendental mind, a descendental approach grounds these in our direct bodily perception of a cosmic community of other actual occasions of experience. Causal connection in nature, whether within our bodies or across galaxies, is a function of sympathetic feelings between occasions disposed in interlocked community. Quote, "So far as concerns the causal efficacy of the world external to the human body," writes Whitehead, "there is the most insistent perception of a circumambient, efficacious world of beings." End quote. That's from his book Symbolism. "I perceive the universe spatiotemporally because my bodily perception directly inherits and recapitulates the universe's aesthetic achievement of such an order." While Kant tried to balance the world upon thought, as Whitehead put it, as though the process of perception were primarily a process of understanding, Whitehead rooted perception in the pre-reflective, non-cognitive feelings and emotions. In his philosophy of organism, higher mental functions like reflective understanding or conscious knowing themselves become special forms of feeling, or just as well said, general forms of feeling. Whitehead distinguishes between sense perception, which is a high-grade form of mentality best characterized as appearance, somewhat disconnected from reality. He distinguishes sense perception and sense reception, which is this primary form of causal transmission operative throughout the universe, which is best characterized as transference of throbs of emotional energy from the settled past into the active present. Whitehead describes the human body as a complex amplifier in process and reality, amplifying these throbs of emotional energy, its network of nerves, analyzing the inflowing data into a coordinated hierarchy of feelings so as to produce an integrated and predictive perspective on the world from moment to moment. Quote, "Our bodily experience is the basis of existence. It is that portion of nature with which each moment of human experience intimately cooperates." End quote, from Modes of Thought. Whitehead's aesthetic ontology is thus grounded in our embodied experience of the encompassing cosmos.